r/AskReddit. Tamzu Tosbit says, what family secret or hidden backstory were you finally let in on when you were old enough? Repulsive Lack 9980 says, when I was young I thought it was really nice that my nana lived with my aunt and her family since she was getting on a bit and it meant she was looked after and there were always people around. Aunt has 6 kids. Occasionally aunt would gripe about being the one looking after nana since aunt is also one of many kids and being young I sympathized, but given they all spent loads of time with nana too didn't think it was a big deal. You don't think about financial responsibility when you're young I think, just social and caring. Well it turns out the reason nana lives with aunt is because aunt and her husband convinced nana to put the house in their name so they could look after her affairs and sold it out from under her and invested the money in a pyramid scheme, so it's gone now. Because of this her siblings refuse to give aunt a penny towards looking after nana since it's her fault nana has no money or assets and instead pay to take nana out all the time, meals, shopping, activities so she doesn't go without, but they let aunt struggle under the weight of nana's general living expenses. Aunt's kids are all independent now, so they are not going to be impacted by money problems. Now I look back at her griping with annoyance and think what a terrible person she is. Baz Ravish says, wow, your aunt is a real conch. Bishomi says, cont. Ratracine Surgeon says, my great grandfather drank himself to death. My grandmother was ashamed of where she lived. He was the town drunk that spent most weekends in jail. She often had to carry him inside before school because he was passed out on the lawn. They finally told me all of this when I started drinking a handle a day. Gaudagiral 2 says, my grandpa died in the local liquor store when I was a kid. Stroke, he was never sober. The lady who was working when he died still works there and I see her when I swing through. Sobering reminder. McPherson says, sobering reminder. Cosmic Cupcake says, my uncle didn't die in a car accident. He killed his mistress and then killed himself by crashing his car with her body in the trunk. Oldenburn says, Stan. Dudenk says, you win. Any external 6221 says, I wasn't so much let in on it as I discovered it. My grandmother died when I was about 8 from lung cancer. I was at her bedside the day she died, and I remember her being bruised all over her face and arms. Years later as an adult, that fact never sat right with me, so I got a hold of her medical records. It turned out she had been mugged leaving the bank, and was basically beaten to death by some guys for resisting. I do understand why my family covered that up. Imaginer Mastodon says, good lord, that poor woman. How tragic. I'm very sorry. Impressive Fan 3742 says, that's absolutely awful, I'm so sorry. Luxinaticid says, I thought my dad died of natural heart related problems over 13 years ago. I was 19. I'm 32 now, and I just found out about a month ago his death was an intentional suicide by pills and alcohol, and they just didn't wanna tell me. Weird side note, his funeral wishes were not respected. His mother, my grandma, pushed for a very Catholic service and burial. My dad was atheist and always very clear he did not want a traditional religious funeral, he wanted to be cremated. He often made fun of religion and kept a flying spaghetti monster magnet on his fridge. It has always just really bothered me someone's final wishes can be so ignored, even by loved ones. Road into Darkness says, this is the one reason I stay alive, despite my depression. I have to outlive the shit stints, so they don't try to bury me in a dress under a name I haven't gone by in 20 years. Minamisat says, when I was 17 I had a friend, she was 19, who had spent the money in the 90s and gone through whatever you had to do to change her name. Her brother had molested her all her life and her parents had kept it quiet. One of the ways she dealt with it was changing her name. She was in a car accident and died. I was so annoyed with all these kids that didn't know her taking the day off of school to attend her funeral because one time they read some of her poetry and liked it and other BS reasons. It annoyed me because they turned it into something about themselves as an excuse to be excused from class and not because I begrudged anyone the right to mourn her. When I got to the cemetery, funeral at grave, I went from being annoyed to being furious with her parents. Her tombstone had her original name. They didn't make an effort to put her legal name anywhere. So to escape some of what she went through, she changed her name just to be buried with the name she cast off. Still pisses me off when I think about it. We're real mad. Harryless says that my father was the product of incest. My great grandfather raped his own daughter, so my dad has the same grandfather and father. Didn't find out until my 20s and dad was already gone, and I'd been disowned, so couldn't talk to anyone about it. It's horrifying how many people are finding out dark family secrets from at-home ancestry DNA tests. Exciting Community 25 says, yeah, home ancestry kits are nuts. Literally last week I found out that the dad who raised me for the first 5 years, who I had recently gotten back in contact with after 32 years, isn't my biological dad. My mum had an affair at work, didn't tell that dude she was pregnant, and went on to marry my not-bio dad, then cheated on him with my stepdad. She then went through a massive court battle to have my stepdad adopt me, that my non-bio dad fought and lost. And my actual bio dad is a massive weirdo with a very young Thai wife, who also happens to be a postman. Couldn't make this shit up if I tried, and I'm a redhead, so I'm literally the redheaded stepchild with the postman for a father. r/AskReddit. QT Lectra says, what's something you wish you did or did more of before having responsibilities? Professional Bug 8815 says, I wish I traveled more and explored new places before life got busier. Princess Bielflatus says, setting my own boundaries after realizing that when I didn't, people set them for me. Craig's Duck says, working out and eating right. Bedbound and Sleepy says, just being a child without responsibilities, being bored because there is nothing to do, no work to be done, and no cartoons on right now. Similar Positive 8165 says, I wish I had spent more late nights learning to play guitar in dingy bars with strangers who became friends over shared cigarettes and stories, back when tomorrow's responsibilities felt like a distant concept that belonged to someone else. Oddfun 2781 says, have wholesome fun. I grew up too fast BC of family circumstances and partied away my teen years. Wish I took advantage of being young and took part in sports, band, theater. Alave Alpha always says, have more enjoyable experiences, travel, art, classes, food, etc. I think if I had done more I would have more things to share with my daughter to inspire her to experience just as much or more. Would be able to provide more well-rounded life advice in general. Chef Boyd 30 says, enjoy the journey. Tamanika Sankuts says, travel. Basically impossible to go some places with little kids. Cheeky Little Fox says, took my time to explore hobbies and interests. Fletchwizzle says, stole money. Messiah 91 says, saving money. Tinyman says, talk to my grandma more. I love my grandma. Lower Currency 3685 says, do people have responsibilities? The question is, do you want them? Cumulonimbus 333 says, I would ask for the days when I didn't take Adderall to keep my brain going. Yeah, probably the days I didn't even know it existed, maybe 5 years old. Those kinda days for sure. Hyoxney says, saving money. Makijis says, I wish I got my degree before getting married and having a child. Don't get me wrong, it's great, but it would have been better if I tried a little more. Rasparistan Dad says, traveling. Quetril Rough Everything says, traveled for fun. I don't think I've ever been on a real vacation before, like Hawaii or Paris or even Canada. Soundboard Queen 725 says, moved to different states or even countries. Gentle Petal says, I wish I had taken more time for self-care and relaxation before everything got busy. Shanetha Binman says, concerts, travel, sex. Yossarian Bonaparte says, had a childhood. Human Wajayu says, travel. TC Nradris says, I wish I had done more of before responsibilities took over, as taking time for self-care and relaxation. Sweet Pinacala Dax says, I really wish I had traveled more before life got so busy. A Faithful Mia says, I wish I had focused more on personal development and learning new skills. Those moments of self-discovery are invaluable. Lonalai Apple P 2004 says, staying up late with friends and having those long conversations can either be nonsense or about life and dreams. Affectionate at 7570 says, I have always had responsibilities. My oldest memories are of work and discipline. I was loved and reasonably happy, but never carefree. Minister Reddit says, I graduated into the Bush economy, so I'm in the cohort of millennials that had responsibilities right out of the gate. Now that I'm more financially secure in my 30s, I'm honestly just goofing off and having fun. It's the same for a lot of millennials, I think. Hell, I opted out of kids just because I wasn't willing to give up my 30s after how hard my 20s were. Sandpaper Pants says, drugs. Greetandra Madagalaxy says, go to school, be more financially literate, and travel more. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.